Says ministers consider giving, here's a brainwave for you, British citizens priority for council housing, right? So they're actually saying, well, if you've been born in this country, you should be further up the list than someone who wasn't born in this country. I would have thought that would have already been the case, but apparently not. Here's Migration Watch UK research consultant Jeremy Hutton. Not sure if you would agree with all of that, Jeremy, or not. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Eamon and Isabel. Thank you for having me. Yes, it sounds utterly, well, it's a sign of the farce that we're in, that the government is having to say, well, we'll have to ensure British people get priority for council housing. I think that typifies exactly why so many people are very annoyed and anxious about channel crossings, is that they see people coming to the UK and quite often being given quite nice houses and being bumped up the council housing lists, and it's just clearly not fair to a lot of other people who are really struggling, because the UK has a big housing crisis, it has a rental crisis as part of that as well, and if people just come in on a dinghy quite illegally, then it's extremely unfair.
So obviously 1,000 travelling over the weekend, with the weather being mostly good before the storms started. I suppose it all plays into why we saw the Prime Minister just sort of 10 days ago coming out and saying his plan was working, because we'd had a spate of, I mean, cynical of me to say, but we'd had a spate of bad weather. I mean, do you think he can really say that the government's plans are working?
At the time, I think it did seem more like that, but certainly every day since that speech seems to have gone against him quite significantly. If you look at it just quarter against quarter last year, it's actually only down 6% now on last year, which is, you know, not really anything. I mean, the original forecasts were that the channel crossings would have risen, but the only reason they've not risen is because of a reduction in Albanians, at which there is news that the number of Albanians crossing could again be rising on what it was earlier this year. So it's still too soon to say on that front as well.
You're watching, like everyone else, with Migration Watch. What can be done about this? What would you like to throw in for consideration?
Well, the key thing, of course, is always to intercept, which is being done reasonably well by the Border Force and the Royal Navy, etc. And after that, of course, to detain and swiftly return to their home countries. In some cases, of course, you can't return someone to their home countries, but that's where something like the Rwanda plan is, of course, quite interesting and quite valuable, because that means that we can send them there to have their asylum claims processed, and then if they are then found to be without basis, then they have any potential home there, or then they can then move on, whilst they're not then taking up housing stock in the UK and putting a burden on our own social services, which are at, suffering tremendous pressures. So that's the key thing, getting to the stage where we can just detain quickly and return them quickly.
But, you know, that sounds right. A lot of people will say, yeah, don't see why you can't. They come ashore, you put them on a bus, you drive them to an airport where there is two planes always sitting fueled up, ready to go, and they'll fly them straight back to where? That's the point. The point from where they entered Britain, you know, they came from France or their original country of origin. Where on earth would something like that work? If it wasn't Rwanda, where could they go?
Well, the government is looking at other countries other than Rwanda that they might be able to replicate the scheme in. I mean, the government are quite bullish about the number of people the Rwandans are willing to take, but of course it would be very prudent to replicate that with other countries. Ideally, the basis of the plan is that once you get it up and running, people will see that if they cross into Britain, they're quite likely to be sent in the complete wrong direction by a significant margin, and then they will be less likely to come, and thus we will actually need to send fewer people to Rwanda or other countries that might be established. Others I've heard rumoured are, I think Ghana has been mentioned once or twice. I think it did initially turn down the government, but if the Rwanda scheme was to work, then I'm sure they'd think twice about that. And the European Union is certainly trying to do something with Tunisia, but that's still in a very early stage.
We talked about Rwanda and these possible other countries. We talked about Albania. We haven't talked much about France. I mean, we're always giving them more cash. Is there any evidence that they are beginning to slow the tide of illegal immigrants, particularly the people smugglers, cashing in on all of this?
It's very hard to say with the France, because of course the government are always very eager to make it out that the French are doing everything they can and they're getting good value for their money, good bang for their buck. I do think there is a sense that the French are trying harder, but the problem is that there's only so much the French can realistically do. So they're effectively playing whack-a-mole. I mean, there was some news out the other day that there's going to be a new spy plane, but spy planes don't stop boats. They only tell us where they are. They only tell us where they are on the beaches. But if there's thousands of people trying to put boats to sea on the shores of Calais, you need an army of French officers to stop them. And the more important thing is to break the business model. So it's not worth paying for a ticket on one of these small boats, and it's not worth the traffickers going through the rigmarole of providing these boats. Yes. So once you make it unprofitable for both the customer and the person buying the boat, that's when it will stop working. There's only so much the French
and not providing social housing, not providing council housing ahead of people born in this country is a factor which may deter. I just want to know, Jeremy, overall, how solvable is this? I mean, I look at it and I don't think this is solvable. And I just think it's going to get worse and worse as climate change and geopolitical factors come into account with all of this. I personally don't have a view that,
I don't think the boats are going to be stopped.
No.
Stop the boats is such a big claim.
Yeah.
I'd be very surprised.
What do you think? Do you think it's solvable with the right will? And if so, in what time period?
Well, that is the big question. The whole point of the current illegal migration problem is that it's pushing the boundaries of a series of international legal obligations that the UK has signed itself up to over the past 75 or so years, since World War II. And those legal obligations make it very difficult for the UK to actually create the laws to get around those. And that's why we're probably going to have a bit of a bust up with the European Court of Human Rights over the illegal migration bill. I think if the current plan doesn't work, and that's when people are really going to start saying we need to be looking at these international legal obligations and working out what it is that's stopping these things, because the pressures that are going to keep coming into Europe, as you say, quite rightly, are only going to keep increasing. But countries like Britain can only take so many people because there's a very small country, we're incredibly densely populated as it is. So I'm very pessimistic about solving them without looking at those legal obligations, and I think that's something that requires a lot more attention. But hopefully, the illegal migration bill will sort this out. But we'll see.
Well, you keep watching. He's Jeremy Hutton. He's a research consultant at Migration Watch UK, and we appreciate your time and your views this morning. Thank you very much indeed.